dumbest person I've ever seen. It'd just be so easy to just destroy you and just make you look like the dumbest person ever.
There are a few sentiments online that maybe on a personal level I can never really get behind. The idea that people should be able to like what they like as long as it's not harming anyone, and the idea that a fandom has no influence on how someone can view a series. Let's tackle the first one. Unless it's for a punchline to a joke or an exaggeration of condescension, I don't think I've ever really judged people for liking certain things, at least on my channel. That ends today, because as much as I would love for people to love what they love, some things are just non-negotiables for me, consciously or subconsciously. If your favorite anime has a pedophile as the protagonist, if you're on the edge of your seat awaiting the next Japanese romance show about a teacher grooming her little stepbro, if you're out here trying to choose your lolly of the season, if you prefer visual novels or manhwa as a medium and you rep Subahibi, then I think I have every right to judge you. Of course, the topic of today, My Hero Academia, is nowhere near as fundamentally offensive as the average episode of Dragon Maid, but there's still a sense of judgment within me that judges those who still give that series the time of day. I'll explain why later, if you can get that far. Which leads me to my second point of contention. The way in which you enjoy something can actually make harm for others, believe it or not. What you like says a lot about you, but it in turn can say a lot about the series as well. There's a reason queer people love Haikyuu, and there's a reason why fight lovers can't get enough of Hunter x Hunter. In turn, if your manga is, let's say, fundamentally conservative in a lot of ways, then it's no wonder the animanga community has a dude bro epidemic. Trust me, I hate that term as much as you do, but you guys saw the intro. You deserve it. Case in point, My Hero Academia taught me a lot about the internet. It taught me that people who enjoy a piece of media can be as toxic as those who troll others for liking it, even more so. The term toxic positivity comes to mind, liking something so much that you're just blinded by not only its flaws, but the love from those who try to criticize it from a genuine place. That's gonna be the thesis for anybody not paying attention. The failings of My Hero Academia as a series, the ignorance from the fandom that there was even a valid and logistical falloff, the responses people got for pointing out that falloff, and how that ties into the greater problems of the animanga community. I'm Christopher Noling this episode. If you thought my tangents were confusing before, then you're gonna feel discombobulated by the end of this one. This is your fault, asshole. Now, shut up and enjoy the show already. Oh, and yeah, I am keeping the comments on.
I have a very weird relationship with My Hero Academia. I'm at this point in my life where I can look at the earlier half of the series and be like, yeah, this guy was truly special. But the harder I think about it, the more sad I become. Boo-hoo. I joke about this series going to shit a lot in my personal friend groups, but seeing that shit happen in real time was low-key kinda devastating. Because despite all of its fuck-ups and fuck-downs, it's actually the series that got me into reading manga on a weekly basis. And ever since, I've had a deeper appreciation for the medium as a whole. I was that person who always woke up early as fuck on a Saturday morning to watch all of the episodes, buy all the merch, make fan art. I would even participate in weekly leak speculating. Yeah, I'm one of those people. Point being, I was crazy for this series. A series that meant the world to me and connected me to so many people that I'm still friends with till this day. So you would imagine how soul-crushing it was when it started to take a turn for the worst. Usually when Horikoshi did something questionable, I was one of those people who always dismissed its apparent flaws. I would say things like, yeah, this is a problem, but it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, he didn't focus on this issue for like several volumes, but he can do it later, guys. No problem. Then later came and, he just never did it. I was pretty much a let him cook merchant, if you will. I was low-key kind of annoying, but as the story progressed, I couldn't keep ignoring the obvious gaps that the story was leaving behind, not only in the current narrative, but for the story as a whole. Plot points being left unfinished or played safe, noticeable gaps in the characters' logic and world building, and issue resolutions that were so fucking insane that they make me roll my eyes to this very day. And naturally, I started to fall out of love with My Hero Academia. Once a series that I adored with every fiber of my being just feels like an afterthought whenever I hear its name. No joy, no anger, just nothing. Truly a wet fart of a series for me.
I'm about to cyberbully again.
I have a complicated relationship with MHA, but I honestly hate having to explain why I find this story so despicable. I mean, sure, any story with a true fall-off will be greeted with despair and hatred, and there's a sense of if you weren't there, then you truly just don't get it. It's not like other shonen where the fall-off consists of cosmic ass pulls, a sling of bad fights, or the story turning out to not be as thoughtful as other people, thought it would be. Mind you, on the outset, sure, things are different, but there isn't really a massive and visible decline in quality. The art is still amazing. The fights are actually pretty good, better than they were before, and on the surface level, if you just turn your brain off, there are some tear-jerking moments. Cause after all, if the characters in the story cry, then we have to cry too, right?
The universal fanfare lasting almost half a minute is sin number 8.
Number 8? The movie just started! What were the first ones?
Nigga, greed, lust, sloth, envy.
And to begin with, I mean, who even liked MHA? Like, for real, who took MHA any more seriously than a kiddish superhero story full of tears and a cast of characters in a school setting we couldn't wait to get out of? The anime is focusing so much of its time and money on Class 1A definitely did not help. I have had conversations with people about how the war arc was ass in the anime because the buildup was terrible. Yeah, and I wonder whose fault that is. MHA was never concerned with aura. It was never a show with an antagonistic group with drip you could bring to school, or moves you can shout during sex. Especially when the fan base is so bad, I can definitely see why so many were put off of it. But this made it all the more difficult to talk about the series' faults, and its eventual fall off. No one thought this was an actual series made for actual people. With so many great animes out there, why would you give time to MHA? And that sucks, right? Because sure, MHA had a lot of arcs that were slogs to get through because of its bare-boned and overly cheesy school setting that took up way too many arcs for those characters to be as bland as they are, but when it locked in, when it got to the root of its world building, when it teased us with quirk lore, when Deku's closest friends got the fights and development they deserved, when the series, as opposed to its contemporaries, slowed the pace down to get us acquainted with these teenagers, when the author took time out of the story to give us details about costumes, the families of the cast, the relationships they've earned over the first year, when the series took a stab at true redemption, along with the complicated through line of abuse, that's what made MHA not only special, but to this day incomparable to any big name shonen that was coming out around this time, or even beforehand. In a world where Jujutsu Kaisen was giving us character deaths every week, in a post-Big 3 era where Bleach and Naruto had controversial endings and war arcs, MHA excelled at the things it tried to do, because despite the lingering issues MHA had during this period, it did what other shows couldn't, stayed committed to what it was trying to say. So you can imagine the turmoil I was in when my favorite stories started to deteriorate in quality. You can see why someone might want to voice their discomfort with the series' trajectory, in an attempt to reach other people who might feel the same way, and you might be able to understand the anguish I felt when others not only didn't feel the same way, but had no problem telling me why in toxic ways. I've been criticized as being an instigator before, someone who starts trouble with the petty goal of stirring the pot just for their own amusement. And if you haven't been paying attention, my channel has always been one of satirical elements that allow me to heighten the more contrarian aspects of my personality. But especially when MHA was ending, needless to say I was having a lot of fun reveling in vindication. But it didn't start out this way. During my early days on the internet, I was nothing but a kid, a not yet legal adult, where did this image come from, who wanted to merely share their opinion. I wrote threads, I critiqued the series in the fairest way I could, interacted with those who disagreed, arguing lovingly in their DMs. I even wrote a Google Doc full of changes I would personally make to the manga, while adding more prepubescent fanfiction elements. At the time, the arc we used to call Villain Hunt, now known as the Dark Deku arc, was dropping. An arc way too short for its own good, being less of a solo arc and more of a ground for exposition dumping, and momentary conflicts that showed that not only the results of the war were kind of unimportant beyond the aesthetic of ruined Japan and the damage everyone had to heal from, but the future of the cast was all but assured because the story at this point was afraid of stakes and consequences. The bath chapter was the start of a lot of people's misery, though I was already acquainted with the arc's issues so it didn't bother me so much. The anime was airing, and worry surrounding the treatment towards one of My Hero Academia's best arcs was rumbling.
Something in the way. Ooh.
It was a very divisive period. Those who were analytical, productive, and all-around social pillars in the fanbase were voicing their disappointment in the franchise as it was. Others, who were hell-bent on enjoying the series, had no problem joining together to shit-talk these people to their face or behind, as if we wouldn't find out. If you didn't like the story, the fandom turned on you, found reasons to attack you, and assured that nothing was wrong at all with the manga or anime. Everyone, including me, were saying valid reasons for disliking the manga. Those who disagreed offered no credible reason themselves for still being so attached. Stating why the series was just as good as it was previously wasn't their mission. Their mission was just to shut you up. Their mission was to make you let them enjoy things. There was no dialogue, no productivity, just constant fighting. And during all of this, people found pretty ridiculous reasons to hate me. Whether that be calling my bout of fanfiction corny, or calling me ableist and transphobic because I told someone crying into space over Bakugo's supposed death was a pretty Looney Tunes ass predicament, and they shouldn't take the jokes about it so seriously. I lost friends over that. But that's kind of the central thesis, right? Self-awareness. The lack of self-awareness that allows people to cry over fiction publicly in the Twitter space and not be able to laugh at the absurdity of it all. The lack of self-awareness that made my friends at the time turn on me, despite seeing me be cooked so many times that they should know just to check in on me before joining on the mob first. The lack of self-awareness that makes people tell others that they have invalid reasons for disliking something while not giving any valid reasons to believe otherwise. The lack of self-awareness that allows you to still adore a series that, if you've watched any of my content, hasn't even been itself for a long time. How long, you ask? How long has the series been lower than the standard it set for itself? How long have fans been talking over those passionate but a little disappointed? How long has the fandom been so divisive? Jesus Christ. Instigation? I like to call it an emotional response to years of having my thoughts and opinions be oppressed and my friendships ending over Looney Tunes ass predicaments. Even if you disagree with my methodology, I hope this video can at least show you how bad things have been for me, why I'm like this, why I can no longer afford to care about what others think, and why I'm calling this my curtain call.
Hey Eli, it's Asa. I watched your new video. I'm just gonna assume at this point that you get off on this or something. You know you lost, right? Like, everyone on the site thinks you're stupid and miserable. Like, a tweet came across my timeline the other day. I saw you rated Superman 2 stars the other day? 2 stars? I don't know why you do this to yourself. You know, you could be making videos about anything. You could be talking about... Look, just call me back when you get the chance, alright?
Let me paint you a picture. You're a teenage girl, more than likely white, and you got autism, ADHD, BPD, osteoporosis. So you're on everything. Syrup, painkillers, cigarettes, weed, Hennessy, vodka. And for some reason, you find yourself on the internet, most likely as a form of escapism. More than likely, you were either on or were around the Tumblr era of the internet. The Legend of Korra's, the Steven Universe's, the Voltrons, maybe even My Little Pony and Undertale. You become invested in not only these types of shows that have more liberal and queer-accepting writing styles, but you become obsessed with the fandoms that come along with them. But just being involved isn't enough for you. It is almost as if your oppressor instincts, your ancestral need to colonize and claim the community of others, maybe because these shows encourage that type of self-expression, or maybe just because you're young, you start hijacking these fandoms, making conversations revolve around ships, being none the wiser to the series' flaws because at least your fave is on screen. Hell, you rep the fave to your dying breath because your way of media consumption has you literally imprint yourself onto fiction, as if that fiction is all that you are, an all-consuming meta-entity. It's parasocial, a sort of lust consumed your mind, and you've turned hypersexual. But you don't care. Hell, if anyone else points this out, then you get to wave around the different sicknesses and disabilities going on with you, to paint the criticism of others as something it isn't, talking over other minorities when they bring up the problematic nature of some writing choices, like, I don't know, a victim of oppression joining the operations of the oppressors. Because it doesn't matter what, say, people of color have to say, you're mentally ill, so you win the oppression Olympics. And why stop there? You use your own experiences with mental health, queerness, and imagine the art you love as, let's be frank, more woke than it actually is. Horikoshi will have a gay Bakudeku ending. It will break the shackles that other manga that I haven't read because this is my first and only manga besides maybe Jujutsu Kaisen would never dare to shatter. Because why wouldn't it? The foreshadowing is all there. You guys just don't see it because you're homophobic. Did I mention I was autistic?
I'm on everything.
Now, let's step in the shoes of someone else. You're, let's say, neurotypical, more than likely a person of color. Maybe you have a love for sports, a fascination with NBA 2K, or maybe you're a European literature head. Maybe you're of middle class and especially of lower class. Regardless, internet culture is something you're unaware of. You're just here to gas up your favorite series while devaluing the series of others, albeit playfully. You might also be here to power scale. Let's ignore the Fushoshis for a minute. There are people on the internet who choose to express themselves in a certain way, talk in a certain way, and do normal fandom stuff. And there's a part of this that weirds you out, because you weren't exposed to queer people or anything of the sort. Hell, maybe your parents instilled in you some sort of semi-conservative black Christian values. So you see all of this and find it odd, because let's be frank, pop culture and queer fandom expression is kind of hand in hand at this point. For some, maybe you spend all your time fighting with these normal anime fans, and in turn, you get a kick out of embarrassing the more toxic shippers and the whites that think they're more oppressed than you because they get more sad than normal. Maybe you're this hyper-aggressive gym bro in group chats who might be a good person, maybe not, but you're just ignorant to the way the world has changed outside of your neighborhood. But frankly, that doesn't excuse the fact that some of y'all are unwilling to learn.
Oh shit, bruh. You're talking about me.
Maybe you choose to mind your business in this regard and do other things to silence the voices that align politically with something you can't comprehend. So you make a group chat. I'm not going to name a specific group chat, I'll just make something up. Let's say your group is called the Chad Hive, and instead of making your ultra-masculine and red-pill thinking apparent, like these other folk, the way you get your rocks off is by belittling the intelligence of others when they don't agree with your interpretation of a story, making yourself the superior in mind publicly, while discussing how your body and soul is superior behind closed doors, a form of pseudo-fascism. You're the type of people I criticized in my last episode. I said people like you don't belong in the fandom spaces that I hold near and dear to me. I said that as toxic as Fujoshi and white woke culture can be in the animanga space, these individuals still operate like a normal fandom. But after taking some time to think about it and assess all the backlash I've garnered over the years, I've realized that maybe I was wrong about that. The anime's window shopper problem is a bigger rabbit hole than I assumed at first. I don't really touch on it on this channel because my internet reputation is often irrelevant to the discussion, but one of the lingering sentiments on my last video was, how the hell could you mess up a Radman dunk? Have you seen his tweets? He should be easy to make fun of. But that very question ignores the greater context of what I was going for, but I realized that the greater context was delivered in a way that was insatiable for the common folk. I see that now, and I apologize. So allow me to readjust my approach. I have never seen such an annoying and hopeless group of individuals in my life. All the animanga community is bickering, dogpiling, an orgy of people who don't want to face the possible flaws within themselves or their mutuals or friends, and instead just want to create a circle jerk of free dunks instead. Whether it be a community of pathetic and performative individuals who think their favorite manga is a progressive piece of art, or a wonderful slice of hope slop, when all the author is doing is creating action figures he can put in jars, or a community of lesser beings who think just liking something isn't good enough, so they put meaning where there is none and rush to their MAGA hats when you think it's a little bit ridiculous. I think a lot of the stories that are liked and are talked about fundamentally don't work in their own framework, and I've talked about that a lot of times before. A lot of the popular Shounen that has released in the wake of the Big Three's ending, you can even include the Big Three into this statement, have so many plot points, character developments, themes that just don't work. They're stories that contradict themselves, say one thing and do another. They forsake their central cast members to develop people that offer no connection between the page and the audience, and their stories that are touted to be about a social and individual consciousness, but then go on to oppress the characters that need it the most. Notice this never happens with good stories. You never get niche threads on Mob Psycho. You don't have people projectile vomit slurs at someone when they dislike the Ava rebuilds, and no one even talks about Fullmetal Alchemist anymore. That's the worst part about it. These people don't act bigoted or obtuse over good shit, things that are actually well put together. They only go to bat for the ones that just freaking suck. and at the very least, I would be fine with that if there was any hope in an actual conversation. I can't stand Ramen Yahoo's demeanor, but I'll sit through a 5-hour video to see why I'm wrong. But none of these people are actually smart enough, articulate enough, or locked in enough to put together words for why they disagree with me. And trust me, I see the irony of calling other people stupid in a video criticizing when other people call people stupid, but some of y'all are just dumb. A few years ago, what feels like a lifetime ago, I made a video where I basically said goodbye to MHA as it was, in the community at large. And if you know anything about me, you know that I did walk away from the fanbase for a time, only really returning to troll, quite frankly. But I realize now that trying to leave the MHA fanbase and enter the greater animanga community at large was wrong. Because the problems I had with the air, the vibe, the behavior of the fanbase was just gonna be the behavior of everyone else. It's funny that both subsets of the internet fought with each other for so long over which series is better, but in the end they turn out to be the same with their response to criticism. Criticism towards the series they love, and criticism for who they are as people. And you know what, maybe it's because we live in an age where everyone is on edge. Not only has the internet adopted more conservative values, but I think COVID had a hand in emotionally detaching a lot of people to others, and hell, to media as a whole. We've kind of just gotten a lot meaner, and there's a sense that the pure and innocent sincerity I saw in the animanga community so long ago is just not enough anymore. This medium has to be an amalgamation of things it never wanted to be or even was, because otherwise, what else are we doing here? In my attempts to try and help people understand why I find these stories to be so broken, to try and harken back to a period of animanga discourse I figured we'd all miss, in my attempt to anger and enrage the individuals who truly deserved it after all the headaches they've given to people over disagreeing with their pseudo-intellectual rhetoric, in my attempt to paint Radman Yahoo as the very thesis and personification of all my issues with the community, in turn, I just revealed to myself that everything I said applied to a bigger pool of people than I ever could have imagined. What I've learned from all of this is that we are not in a period where people enjoy media. We are in a period where people are in love with their own interpretations of media, their own headcanon. They think that someone questioning the act of adding unnecessary subtext to a series means that you're against being analytical. And I was stupid to think otherwise. I was stupid to think those who are part of a more accepting group of people that these conservative manga readers have repeatedly insulted publicly and privately, were any different fandom-wise from the culture of people I was criticizing in the last episode. I was an idiot to think that Israel was a land of people far away that we could all laugh at. No. We are in Israel! At the end of the day, right or left, gay or straight, black or white, the animanga community is unified on one thing. No one can stand when their favorite manga is challenged. Maybe I am hard to please, but I'd rather be that than be so brain dead that I insult others over a piece of fiction, make up things that don't exist to justify my toxic enjoyment, or betray others in my circle just because I'm too much of an idiot to truly think about what I'm consuming. This isn't just the internet anymore. This isn't just manga to me. It's bigger than that. You guys just suck, period.
Post My Hero Academia has certainly been a weird time, but not necessarily in a bad way. It's not often that you get to experience something for 10 years, and when you have to say farewell to it, there is a certain void left. It's one that will not be so easily replaced, and probably never will be, but that's okay. Granted, of course, a lot of us are still in the Season 8 waiting room to finish out the anime as well, but in between that time, I've settled on my final thoughts for the series. I think some of my feelings, particularly with Act 3, will always be full of ups and downs. Even with chapters like 431 and even more content from Horikoshi's last projects, there definitely will be some things I remain disappointed in, but I believe that's to be expected. Missteps happen, and ongoing shipping drama aside, because that's just where we are now, I'll always have love for the series. It shaped a lot of my perspective when it comes to discussing anime and manga in general, and now as I engage in newer stories such as Gachi Akuta, I'm able to look for a lot more in stories in general. Of course, I will be there for the final season and continue watching Vigilantes, and despite what additions may come, I have overall found my peace with my time reading MHA, and hopefully, whether someone enjoyed it or walked away disappointed, we'll all arrive at that same point.
God, how are you so f***ing happy all of the time?
I don't know, Eli. How are you such a midget?
I'm not a midget, I'm fun-sized! Look, at least I'm not like Lyrish and his pals and talk like the car from Regular Show. Oh, Eri. I'm gonna get you out of here, I promise. Not only does the story not deserve her, but honestly, y'all don't deserve her. On everybody's soul, she's the best character in the series, and if you disagree, come kill Hinokami J about it. She's adorable and she's my daughter. I could stop the analysis there, but that really encapsulates why she's so important to me. My Hero Academia Season 4 was the first time I watched the show weekly, and she was the focal point of that season. She was a gateway for me in that regard, but she was also a gateway for the new MHA. The series was becoming darker, dealing with more pressing issues, and Eri was the first in a long line of abuse victims in the story. The motif of smiling when things get too hard, the motif of dancing as a showcase of your own freedom, all began with her. She was the bridge into what MHA was and what MHA started being, and it helped immensely that her introduction started easily one of the best runs in Shounen I've yet seen be defeated. She was more than a plot device, and she was more than a damsel. She was allowed a future and a chance of finding herself, and with her, saving people started to take on another meaning, not just physically but emotionally, not just good people but victims of the system. The series that once dedicated a whole arc to changing the meaning of saving someone became a story so uninterested in truly saving anyone. It's no wonder then that the story carelessly made someone like Eri so unimportant and maim her just for the sake of the plot. Two things that are too similar to what happened to people like the League, the traumatized kids like some of the cast members, the heteromorphs, and even to our main character, who, if you've been paying attention at all, is a metaphor for disabled people. It's not just an Eri problem, the story has an outcast problem. Maybe this bothers me so much because so often I found that I am the outcast. No one's really proud of their high school selves. I mean, we're kids dealing with hormones, new emotions, and an education system that asks us to bear all of that at 6 o'clock in the morning. I had a lot of friends, but a lack of deeper relationships. So with that emotional exhaustion and loneliness, I turned to the internet. I had a history of being online, but Twitter was the first time I actually got truly invested into a site long term. I kind of needed to as an outlet for socializing and expressing myself. So when you're a lonely teenager thrusted into an environment with, let's be frank here, secret social rules and etiquette that are a complete mystery to you, and your favorite story sucks along that time too, you're kind of in for a disaster. I've made some real connections through my time on Twitter and through the MHA fanbase, but I've made a lot of enemies. Some of it was my fault, but most of it wasn't. If you were connected to the fanbase and you showed even a little bit of dislike for where the story was headed, or what the anime was doing to the story's best content, oh boy. That's why I can never agree with the sentiment that when Season 5 was airing and Villain Hunt was dropping, that it was impossible to truly be happy on either side. It was nothing short of infuriating to be faced with honest-to-God disdain and misery because a show you love so dearly deteriorated in quality, and the only reason people weren't seeing it was because of some kind of brand loyalty. Just look at my comment sections, dog. Sure, I play into the conniving, cynical critic that so many label me as, but it goes far beyond calling out my snark and my antagonism. These people hate me for disagreeing with them. Do you know how hurtful it is to work on a video with some of your closest friends who have been in the trenches with you, only for that same video to get trashed by people who didn't even see the value of that work enough to give it a fair shot and watch the whole thing? And then one of the guys in that video go on to make a video of their own, using part of yours for the basis of theirs, uploading theirs before you could even finish post-production on yours, and they get double the view count with none of the hate. No disrespect to Sync. If he wasn't a great person and an amazing YouTuber, I wouldn't have worked with him. But my name, my experience with the fandom has been so traumatic, so tarnished, that we can by proxy make very similar projects, so much so that they share parts of the same script, and we get vastly different receptions for it. Call it karma, call it the consequences of my actions, call it whatever you want. My main point is, my experience with the fandom was awful. My experience with the story was awful. And when all was said and done, I felt just as alone at the end of it all as I did when I decided to download Twitter in the first place. I guess what I've been trying to say is that my experience on the internet has been relatively shitty, and at the very least, if the sheep-like vitriol was saved for good stories, then maybe I'd be more sympathetic, but MHA is just not a good story. Maybe there's a reason Horikoshi's previous works never got picked up. His serializations have been rejected one after another, and while I have yet to go back and read them, aside from Tenko, they seem, I don't know, fine. But MHA was Hori's last attempt, his make or break moment. When he tells us his self-insert is Deku, it's obvious to me. Both had a dream, a passion that the world kept telling them that they're not good enough for, so they aim to quit. But they give it one last shot just to tell themselves that they tried, because they really can't help themselves. However, like Izuku getting brought into his dream job, Horikoshi succeeded. It might not be doing KNY or One Piece numbers, but MHA is still fairly popular, especially in Japan. And initially, Horikoshi took advantage of his newly formed platform to vent about his frustrations and critiques on the society that has rejected and abused him as well as others. At least, that's what I presume, given how much emotional attention he gave these topics at a time. His author notes are usually just him talking about how he's butt buddies with Gege, so, not much to go off of. But he backed out. Instead of committing to these topics, maybe as a fear response that his baby would have been rejected by the very people he aims to critique, he copped out of giving those marginalized and abused fair and good endings, and, like his contemporaries, assured that the society that maybe deep down at some point he wanted to himself destroy like his characters would continue to exist and claim victory in the end, so much so that the boy who works so hard to be accepted by his peers and the people he wants to save end up withdrawing from his life when he's of no longer use heroically, left to be a loner in an ocean of societal issues, some of which may have been resolved, but in very patronizing ways that don't give any answers to questions that Horikoshi was definitely not equipped to even ask. People wondered why I was so high and mighty in the last episode. Because everyone has the right to their opinion and how they interpret media, why fight pseudo-intellectualism with pseudo-intellectualism? If there's anyone like me who feels like the world is against them but chooses to keep being themselves in a sea of people who can't think for themselves, then you should know that maybe in a sense, you are better than the rest. The truth is, being put on a projector, being on people's minds in such a negative light, has always gave me anxiety. Not only do I hate being perceived, I also hate being disliked. So my tone, the tone that has possibly severed my connection to like-minded people, is nothing more than a response to all of the bullshit. But at the end of the day, despite everything I've been through, I'm still me. And in that way, maybe My Hero Academia did teach me something. It taught me what not to do when you're standing against those who may reject what you've wanted to say for years. It taught me that when you're really in your bag, you shouldn't let the voices in your head make you second guess yourself. Because when you do, when you start giving a shit about what others think, you get My Hero Academia's final act.
I never hated MHA. Came close a few times, and some people on Twitter and in certain communities probably believe that I do.
Oh, for Christ's sake, say his name!
But in retrospect, I still feel much of those negative opinions that I held were mainly built out of love for the series' world and its characters. You know, back when the manga ended, I held the opinion that the biggest flaw of My Hero was its lost potential. Phenomenal character writing with uninspired, safe, and underwhelming conclusions. A world filled to the brim with opportunity and rich themes, not quite hitting the mark with its execution. By the way, it's been a year since this manga ended, that's fucking crazy.
Yeah man, you getting up there.
You know, honestly, at the end of the day, I can't say my opinion on any of that has changed. While there are a few things that have been improved in my opinion by added chapters and slight changes in perspective after the epilogue, I still think the ending was flawed, rushed, underwhelming in certain aspects, and definitely underwritten in others. But I won't lie, I do think I have softened on it as a whole. Maybe this is just what happens to a series after it ends. Or maybe it's just how I have distanced a bit from directly interacting with the toxicity of the fandom. Regardless, I've found myself spending less time being mad at decisions being made in canon, and more time living with the archetypes of the characters, the existing writing that I still loved, and the ideals of their thematic narrative importance. I can kind of compare it to where a lot of fanfiction or headcanons come from, dissatisfaction. It's no secret that I was very dissatisfied with the ending and entire third act of My Hero, but I've spent enough time with the series that it's always going to be a part of my life. And to be completely honest, anger and dissatisfaction can only exist in my head so long before it just gets old. I've spent so long talking about why I'm disappointed in My Hero, I'm at a point where I just kind of have to tell myself to get over it. So instead, I took that previous dissatisfaction and morphed it into kind of a new perspective. This series now sits on its own tier for me in my head. I'm not thinking of it as good or bad, comparing it to other series and whether I enjoy it more or less. Hell, I'm not even super hung up on what canon has done wrong anymore. I now view it primarily as something that has impacted me and influenced my perspective on art as a whole for the rest of my life. It's very similar to how I view Dragon Ball Z, choosing not to get too into critiquing it, but rather loving it for what it is, all the faults included. So even though I still have my problems with it, I guess I've fallen back in love with My Hero Academia.
Is it petty to feel enraged to see people like what you dislike? Of course, but that's nonetheless how I feel. That comes from a true place of hurt. If you were passionate about MHA like I was, analyzed it like I did, thought about it as much as I once opted to, then you should be right along with me in being disgusted at how much the story deviated. The fact that so many people in the fandom space don't shows me that we all love this series for very different reasons, which brings me back to that empty feeling again. Knowing people you used to have debates with, theory craft with, and excitement over new content with either didn't like it as much as you did, or liked it for very surface level reasons. Is that petty? Again, yes. But when asked the question, was I too harsh to MHA? My answer will always be no, because my harshness was a plea to a docile audience. If stories like these can do whatever they want with its characters, its themes, its lore, and get away with it, then stories are just gonna get worse and worse as the years go on. People won't be able to see the bad in what they otherwise might admire because they're so blinded by their emotions for a story that really isn't even itself anymore. Loving the story not because it's worth loving, but because of their preconceived loyalty to that story. I'm sorry, but I'm just not gonna be a YouTuber who's gonna open every video with a disclaimer that states, hey, this is just my opinion, because it's obvious. But the fact that so many either just don't want to comprehend what I'm actually trying to get at in my videos, or just resort to name calling and dogpiling as a response to my videos, says something about my opinion, doesn't it? Maybe it's just something you can't refute. I can never stop myself from being passionate about something. I love storytelling as an art form, and there are so many opportunities for greatness and untapped experiences I still have on my plate. So just because my series shut the bed doesn't mean I can't love again, no matter how much my online persona would tell you otherwise. However, I think I'm done with fandom shenanigans. Me being cooked on the global scale is nothing new. It's sort of become a game of how bad I can make people's timelines for a few days. But that feeling of finding out acquaintances, friends, mutuals, and people I want to connect with are a part of my problems is something that I can never seem to stomach. But I'm not running away. Separating myself from the culture is just something that will help me keep being me. So, if you're ever offended that somebody won't let you enjoy the things you enjoy, just remember that there are people out there who exile and outcast those who dislike the things you like, and people who will respond even worse if you justifiably act out in return. If you're ever curious about the fact that there's so much tension in the air with the things you love, then I ask you to at the very least be aware of the reasons of why that is, if you wish to involve yourself with others in a fandom. There's no reason a toini ever needs to exist again.
And I know everyone is not going to agree with my consensus, and that's completely valid. But counterpoint.